Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us, the second one in history that we have recorded being champions of the Concacaf Nations League. We're 2 for 2 winning the damn trophy, and we've got another one possibly to win this summer, but it is time to celebrate because honestly, I know there's been a lot of like weird stuff and vibes going around the program as a whole, but I think people are losing the sight of the fact that we just watched one of the most fun U.S. men's teams ever win a trophy in dominating fashion. So to talk about that with me today, I have Thomas, a.k.a. U.S. Keeper, and Caleb, a.k.a. USMNT Corner. Now, Thomas, in the grand perspective, I know we don't quite give Nations League the weight that I think it may be deserving of, but I mean, back-to-back titles in a tournament that just was made up a couple of years ago. That's pretty cool.
It is. It's an evolving tournament. I think, I question how often they play it, because you go right back into it in general. But I think it's a good opportunity on a kind of a smaller scale to get, your A team together, right? And you get them for, 10, 11 days. You kind of build up for these final round, final two matches. And I think it's just a great opportunity to do that on a smaller scale. And I think it kind of shifts what the Gold Cup is on certain levels in terms of which quality talent you bring into it. So it's great to see because you want to see your A team. You want to see your A team winning trophies. You want to see your A team doing those things. So yeah, it's starting to it's starting to feel a little bit more real with it.
Look, I mean, Caleb, just like Thomas said, the A team won a trophy. Like, I feel like that takes on such importance because if you want to build a team that doesn't have a full-time head coach right now that's going to win, it's a great way to do it.
I mean, games with trophies always up the ante, right? I mean, it's one thing to play friendlies all the time, but when you have stakes, it just makes the competition that much more, right?
Yeah.
And to Thomas's point, I think having another big competition is just better for the program as a whole because as we continue to grow and as we become deeper and deeper as far as our depth chart goes, there's going to be guys that are quality players that are not getting as many opportunities. So now you have multiple tournaments that are not a World Cup, quote unquote, that they still mean something, especially regionally. So it gives guys something to play for, gives opportunities for guys to step up. I saw, Thomas, it might have been you, someone on Twitter saying the Gold Cup would be a great tournament to have some of the youth players step up to see if they can play against, quote unquote, the men, right?
Yeah, I think that would be a great opportunity for that. It's evolving. I think everyone needs to evolve with it in terms of the whole federation because it's I think you still want to win these tournaments regardless of who's playing them. So I think you have to kind of figure that out. I think right now they're in a transition. There's a lot going on in this cycle. The perspective 2025, 2014, Gold Cup, what's going to look like. So it's going to be interesting. But I think this gives these European players, because that's was the majority of the roster, that opportunity to win a trophy, and have a real camp, and then kind of rest themselves, recover, and then go back into their preseason for their clubs.
Look, the U.S. has now won both Concacaf Nations Leagues. I know it's only been around for 2 years, but we won both of them. That is, to me, an important step in this team and this program truly becoming the giants of the region. And that was kind of the narrative going into this, right? You had Canada who, for about a year and a half, was talking all this crap about how they won World Cup qualifying, and that means they're the best in CONCACAF. They haven't won a trophy in 23 years in anything, but they made up a stupid little trophy for them because of World Cup qualifying. and they thought that they were the top dog. You had Mexico out there just crumbling foundationally, but still trying to hold on to their title as best in CONCACAF, as they've had for forever. But no one wants to give that to the U.S. right now, it seems like. But we here in the U.S. fandom, we see it. This is a team that has talent up and down the positions. I mean, the 23-man roster we had at Nations League was probably better than Panama for sure. And sorry, it was probably better than most Mexico players as well. Like, this team specifically, the team that just played, it is special. It is a very good team. It's probably the best assimilation of talent that we've had in a U.S. shirt ever. And I'm saying that like sincerely. Every position is loaded. And then you even consider the fact that like you lost players to the tournament, right? Like Wes McKinney has to sit out with a red card, and Serginho Dest has to sit out with a red card. Miles Robinson misses the final for an injury, and you had to replace all three of those guys in three very key positions. And their backup still got the job done. So like this team right now is special, and we're not going to talk about Greg too much on this particular episode, but I do just want to say that like I don't think Greg was necessary to get these players to grow in the 7 months post World Cup, because they had to do that on their own, and they've all grown individually. They've all evolved into better, more hardened veteran players. And I think as a team, actually, the not having a true head coach, that forced this team to actually come together and create something that is bigger than a head coach or even one individual player. That's just what I've seen from this tournament, is that this team finally, like especially the performance in the final, they were all just so locked in. And that performance against Mexico, you could tell that they were out to prove a point. And to me, that was the group of guys coming together to do that. That wasn't necessarily a coach or not a coach. That was the guys in the locker room coming together to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the attitude of the players individually on the field. I mean, one of the biggest moments that stood out to me, such a great moment, right after Gio Reyna's assaulted. He goes down the other side of the field, makes a move, gets tackled, jumps right back up, and it's just pumping up the crowd. And I mean, it was like one of those moments where if there was any doubt left, there was no more at that point. It was, we are the kings of CONCACAF. We are the boss now. There's no more debate. You heard it in Pulisic's pregame speech, in the behind the crest video with some choice words. I love to see that kind of passion from our leader. He said it. We're not the underdogs anymore. Let's go prove it.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, without a doubt, there's no question.
Yeah.
For anybody.
Look, you win a trophy, and look, let's also just kind of frame it this way. I think the reason why I personally like Nations League is because you kind of get the whole tournament in little bite-sized pieces, The Gold Cup kind of sucks because you got to play all these crappy teams, and no disrespect to them, sorry, but like they're just not. I'm not going to enjoy watching us play either, French Guiana or Antigua or what an island nation, and then again Trinidad. That's just not going to be super enjoyable in the terms of like, oh, this means something, there's stakes on the line. So the Gold Cup is kind of like a hard tournament as a fan to really dig into, because you have like this 3 month or 3 week period that half of it's playing teams that just aren't fun to watch. It's hard to play against. With the Nations League, you only have to do that. You see 2 matches per window, and then you get to the final and it's like, oh yeah, this is the main course right here. And you don't have any other fluff around it. So to me, this team taking that approach of, we are the favorites, we're here to win. Thomas, to me, to see that in this window specifically, really does signal like a true turning of the page or that next step in the development of this program.
Yeah, it totally does. You can see it in the players. They know that, the job isn't done, right? I mean, so they have gone out there, and these players talk to each other all the time. We know there's a motivation. We know there's communication. It's much different. I mean, they see each other from time to time when they play one another. So that continuity is massive, and so you see it. You see it in the passion, and it's like like a family reunion every time these guys get together, and that's a big deal. Like that's it energizes. So a lot of these players who had tough club seasons, right, to come and to make a stand and to make a and win a trophy, that's going to help some of these players who are we're talking probably at least a half dozen who are going to probably change clubs here over in Europe. So yeah, it's really a collective group of talent, and it's exciting to watch that high level. And to your point about the Gold Cup, it is a little bit of a slog, right, of a tournament at times, and so I think this suits the A team. So I'm excited to just to see what what's next for some of these guys going into the into the off season.
Well, let's get into the game action because both of these games are fun to talk about. Let's just put it that way. First off, the U.S. draws Mexico in the semifinal. And look, let's be real honest. This Mexico team is not very good right now. They were not good coming into this. The reason that the U.S. actually drew Mexico is because they failed to gain enough points during the group stage of this Nations League between both Tata's team and now what was Diego Coca's team. He's now been fired. But this was not a great Mexico team. But they're still Mexico. They have El Tri, like they still have that mystique about them. And you're still playing in a stadium that's 65,000 people, and 85% of that is Mexico fans. From the get-go, this game felt different. It felt and even different than the 2-0 at home in Cincinnati during World Cup qualifying. Like this felt like we had full control of the match. Now it took a little bit. It took about 25th minute when Pulisic got his that chance that he put over the bar, but I don't think that this was a U.S. team that feared Mexico. Respected, sure. There was no fear in these guys' eyes. They were hunting. They were sharks going after blood because they knew that Mexico was a team they could beat. And Caleb, for me, a 3-0 win over Mexico, that's a great, that's a fantastic feeling.
I mean, you have to love it. They were the class, quote unquote, of Concacaf for a long time. And yeah, they are. They're still Mexico. A bad Mexico still probably top 3, right, in the region. So you're right, though. I think it felt different. Normally, we go into a match versus Mexico, and I'm a bit nervous, and I didn't feel that way at all. I just, you can see it in the way the players carry themselves, the way they move on the field. They're not, bright-eyed anymore. They're killers, like you said. And I think, a lot of that is the fact that we have so many guys playing at such a high level now.
Yeah.
They, like Pulisic, he's literally won a Champions League final. You think he's getting nervous to play Mexico in a Gold Cup or a Concacaf Nations League? No, it's not going to phase him. When Scally, which by the way did a great job in the final versus Canada, but facing Alphonso Davies, like he's playing week in week out in the Bundesliga, not always versus an Alphonso Davies type quality, but still dream quality.
Right.
Easily the same quality that Mexico is going to put out. So he sees it weekly.
Right.
It's not something you're going to have to get up for once or twice a year anymore. It's the norm.
Well, let's look. We got to put I think, outside of Tyler Adams, and even now that's up for debate apparently, but this was about as first choice of a lineup as you could get, Thomas. It was every position probably was the guy that you would want to start. Maybe there's one or two that you're like, oh, maybe I would rather this person, but like the starting 11 was your first choice. Debatable what Mexico's starting 11 if that was their first choice, but that's because fans hate their team and hate all their players right now and hate their coach that they just fired. But this team, the first choice 11 for the U.S., I mean, they dominated Mexico. The stats, Mexico ended with more possession. Obviously, that's because Mexico was down 2-0 and then 3-0. They were chasing, they had to put a lot of pressure on us. But 11 U.S. shots to 5 for Mexico. 5 chances created to 0 for Mexico. And I think that's the tell for me is Mexico really didn't produce anything threatening at all throughout the entire match.
Yeah, they really didn't. I mean, the formation change for me, essentially flipping the midfield to have it's supposed to having, Adams in back. You flip to actually put, Reina in that attacking midfield position. It creates a different flow attack for that for that group, right? And so I think that's been critical to what we've seen, in the 2 matches, right? Like it's just a different style. It allows that more creativity from your playmakers, and so it's not a slog of just passing the ball around, because possession doesn't mean anything unless you do something with it, right? I mean, you hear it all the time, possession with a purpose. And when they had the possession, when they had the ball, they were dangerous. You know what I mean? Dangerous on the attack, dangerous on the counters. Like it's a very different team you're watching than you were at the World Cup.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In terms of that, I mean, obviously there are a few different players there, but it's not a huge, we're not talking, wholesale changes here. We're talking a couple, tweaks to the lineup, and, you're breaking them down, and you're taking them to school. I mean, you don't see that very often, United States versus Mexico, at least on the United States side.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Mexico has dominated the U.S. in some of those, in last, couple decades in that manner, but like you rarely see it. U.S. has 2, other defeats. They defeated Mexico 4-0 in '95 and 3-0 in 2000 in the U.S. Cup. And I don't remember those matches specifically, but that's it. There's no other like dominant victories for the United States until the one of the Gold Cup. So it's a very, again, flow, and they just are allowed to kind of do different things that we hadn't seen 6 months ago.
Well, it's now 6 matches in a row that the U.S. that Mexico has failed to beat the U.S. And to be fair, Mexico dominated for the period of time before that. Like, let's be real honest, especially that 2011 through 15, Mexico has had our number. But Caleb, again, I just look at this team, and I do think that the World Cup, I think we all agree that overall we looked pretty darn good compared to what I think we have seen from U.S. teams in the past. But I think the key players, right, who were at that point and just in November, young guys, they've grown up a lot. And I think that tournament, they've matured in their club seasons. A lot of them have had rough club seasons, This team, again, it just looks like a team that is so more focused, driven, and understanding of the point of playing international soccer.
I mean, it's kind of hard not to grow up when you're going through up and downs club wise, right?
Yeah.
You're going to grow, right? Those lumps create growth, period. And then, you got to give a lot of credit to the World Cup tournament. I mean, that's an experience for some of these players where they went in, obviously, with a lack of experience in major tournaments like that. And they've come out, they played well, they have that confidence riding, and they're coming and they're playing in a regional tournament that they know they can dominate. And you saw the confidence on the field. The results speak for themselves. It's a lot of fun to watch. And I think, another thing that people just, I don't know if they fail to realize or they're just looking past, but, we have a really talented team. And the longer they play together, the better they're going to look.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw.
Well, we saw the U.S. dominate, but we also saw Mexico implode. Like, let's be real honest. What they did in the game was classless, trashy, and downright unacceptable from the way that their players responded to getting whipped up and down the field, to the way their fans in the 13th frickin' minute had to get we had to start the protocol for them to not say a homophobic chant that they're just aware that they're not supposed to say anymore, to the referee basically just calling it early. And I know the reports are like, oh, he didn't do it because of that. He did it because of that. Like, he did it because he was like, all right, listen, we're not going to stop this game again. That we're done. Thomas, this Mexico team, I mean, they just we're recording on Monday after the Champions League, the Nations League victory. Diego Coca's been fired. This Mexico team, this Mexico program is not in a good space. So how much can we actually take from the fact that we just whooped up on them 3-0?
Well, I mean, I thought the hire of Coca was odd anyway. And then, I mean, it wasn't going well. I mean, it's not surprising. This isn't surprising for Mexico. I don't know if the stats are correct, but I looked at some of the history of Mexico. I mean, they've had 65 appointed managers, and 40, and 44 of them, have been unique. So they're rehiring lots of managers along the way. So they are a mess of a confederation. I will say, they're willing to get rid of someone and not just stick with it. And so I don't know if that's right or wrong. I think in this case they made the bad choice, so they have.
They'll fire a guy. That's for damn sure.
Well, that's the thing.
Fire a coach.
They have no harm, no fear in doing that. If in bad performances, and I respect it, because you can't sometimes just sit there and let it happen, because they have an expectation. I mean, they've been dominant for a very long time, and now that it's hosting there, they're one of the hosts. I think they don't want to miss that opportunity. But I think that the reality is, I just think they're in a transition, right? I mean, they didn't qualify for the Olympics. They didn't qualify for the U20s. You know what I mean? Like, that's telling to maybe where their development is maybe just a little behind. There's just a pocket of that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I'm sure they'll get a coach that can, coach this team up a little bit. But even in the last cycle, we were talking about this team isn't as strong or as quality as we had normally seen, and so they had a battle to qualify for the last World Cup. So I think that's some of it there as well.
I mean, look, I think, Caleb, we saw this with the U.S. when we missed out on the World Cup in 2018. There definitely seems to be like a missing generation type thing with Mexico right now. But let's also not forget that Mexico struggled to qualify in 2014. If it wasn't for Graham Zusi, they wouldn't have been at the World Cup. So it's not like Mexico has been this dominant force, and maybe a dominant force, but not a great team for about a decade now. Let's be real honest. But again, the way that this team manhandled Mexico and Mexico's response, I think, is the perfect encapsulation of where these two programs are right now.
I mean, there's frustration there. You can see it. I mean, obviously, Herc talks about all the time. The Federation just holds them back. Something's got to change over there. As a U.S. men's national team fan, I applaud it. I love it. I love seeing Mexico down. But the competitor, right, wants to see them competitive, because if you're going to play them and they're weak, then what's that really say? I do think beating them 1-0, okay, but it was 3. I mean, and honestly, we took our foot off the gas. We could have continued to press if we wanted. We were having our way, and they're down, like you said, kind of like ours. This lost generation, cycles come and go. Look at Italy. It's the way it goes.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's going to take a while. It took us a good little while to recover. Maybe this is what their federation needs to have some sort of change, because the way things are going right now, it's obviously not working.
But we beat them 3-0. We absolutely clowned them. They made clowns of themselves. Like I think that's why it just felt so good, is because you could just see how mad the players were, the fans were, that we ran them off the pitch. I mean, it was something special. And for me personally, I've been to several. I've been to, 3 USA Mexico matches in my life, and that the morning of, I definitely had my general nerves. Like, you're always nervous / hype for the USA Mexico game, but I mean, we got about 15 minutes in, and I was just like, oh, we're all right. And that's a different feeling. And Thomas, I don't know if it's like, oh, the expectation is we beat Mexico every time now, because I mean, obviously this Gold Cup is going to be vastly different teams, but as Pulisic said, we're not the underdogs anymore.
No, I mean, I've watched this for a very long time. I'm always nervous because I've been in matches where U.S. has had moments of domination. And I think there's been a couple matches where they've been up 2 goals, and then Mexico would come back and scored 4. I'm never comfortable, right? The third goal, I was like, all right, third goal, we've got it, we're good, type of thing. I mean, it's just, you never know how quickly they can flip the switch on that. And but again, it's different. This group is a very mature group. They've grown, and that's the great thing about that, is that evolution, and it's happened pretty quickly since the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to that. And I'm hoping what we do that is we're able to bring in additional players, right, into that. Each different window, bringing in a few other pieces to experience that A group along the way, because we've got some windows coming up where I think we're playing, hopefully in Europe in September, and then we've got the October window coming up, where you're playing Germany, and so there's an opportunity there, and I think that cohesion, that depth, and what we're seeing, the depth is it's very exciting to have the next man up, and go out there and produce, as opposed to saying, geez, we're out of it now. You know what I mean? Because our McKinney's out with a red card, or Dest is out with a red card.
Yeah.
Like, those things there in the past have been scary moments, for fans in matches that, if you have your full squad, you feel pretty good about, and now you can just say, hey, come in, Scally, do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you know what? At the end of the day, too, the stars shined in this game. The role players were great. Don't get me wrong, but Christian Pulisic dominated, right? He bossed the game. He was by far the best player. I mean, I know Fat Mob gave him the highest rating. Scoring 2 goals helps, but that man was on another level. Tim Weah was cooking something special. Serginho Dest, I mean, the sauce that he brought to the field was hotter than anything you can find at your little taco stand anywhere. It was a team of it was a team performance for sure. But man, our stars shone, they shined brightly against Mexico. Caleb, that to me, but even then, you get Pepe scoring, who's not I still think he's a really good striker. It's kind of clear he's not the preferred one right now, but this was a complete performance, but the individuals also had fantastic performances.
Well, that's what you need. I mean, you need your stars to step up. And I think it also goes to show that club form doesn't always.
Serginho Dest has not played a club match in 18 years or something.
And the dude he was cooking, right? I mean, Pulisic arguably had one of the, Dest and Pulisic had 2 of the worst club seasons in recent memory. And they came in and were by far top players. Pulisic obviously being the best player on the field. So yeah, I think a lot of people give so much credence to club form, and I think it gives you an idea, an inclination, and that earns you call ups. But at the end of the day, if the club form doesn't show itself on the field for the U.S., then it doesn't matter. Who cares what your club form is? So
Club form gets you noticed. Your performance with the team keeps you on the team. That's the way I kind of look at it.
You have to perform. You have to perform. We've seen guys that light it up for club. They come and they show up with the U.S. kid, and they're, where are they?
Timmy Chandler.
But we could go down the list, but you're right. I think that was a big difference. We had guys step up. Now, they're missing Tecatito, Chucky Lozano, like they're missing some guys, but still, it's no excuse. We were missing guys versus Canada, and we still performed. So you can't just say, "Oh, we're missing our best guys. That's the reason why." You're always going to have to deal with things like that, and our guys stepped up, and knocked it out of the park. It was fun to watch. And BJ, you got to give him credit. I think the Gold Cup's going to be a big test for him. You got to like the way that he's putting the rosters together, putting the lineups together. His substitutions make sense. The games flow well. Like, you got to like what he's doing. And the Gold Cup's going to be a much different roster. So, how much of it is just letting talent go out there and do what talent does, and how much of it is him pulling strings, we'll see. But regardless, it's just what a fun last week for U.S. fans.
It seriously, like, I think also the 10 p.m. kickoff somehow even made it even crazier. Like, it just made it worthwhile. Then Concacaf made us wait again for the Canada game because they said it was an 8:30 start. We didn't start until 9:06 because, I don't know, reasons. But hey, we get a 2-0 win then over Canada. And this was a Canada team that got our number in qualifying. And I'll give them props. They were definitely the best team in qualifying. They outperformed all of their numbers. And I think that is clear that they had a very good string of good luck. And I think they play a style of soccer that forces mistakes in a region where mistakes are going to be made. And they are able to capitalize them because they do have some good talent. But as a team, they're not there yet. And that's just what I came away from this US's 2-0 win was, y'all talked all this crap to get 2-0 in a final on a fairly neutral site. Like, we can talk about attendance in a little bit, but it was probably a more pro-US crowd, but that was a neutral site. This wasn't you putting us up in the frozen tundra of Hamilton or Edmonton, and you came out there and you lost 2-0. Your best player got absolutely bottled by someone who, though he plays in the same league, is nowhere near the level of player that he is. You had zero response defensively to anything we did in attack. Once we broke their initial midfield press, they were not able to touch us. And honestly, it could have been a worse scoreline for them if not for their goalkeeper, who, by the way, is probably going to be aging out in the next, definitely after this next cycle. So I'm not quite sure if they're fully ready to move on from Borjan. But Thomas, this was a different type of dominant performance than the Mexico game was.
Yeah, different players play different roles, right? So they had to replace certain players. Scally came in and played very well. Aronson, which I was shocked that he started, came in and really, helped defensively, on that wing and really provided a lot of energy.
Little bro came through.
Yeah, and Reyna just, he took it over, right? And he had some beautiful touches and beautiful passes, and he controlled that midfield, and in a way we want to see it, right? That creativity, he was on a different level, and it was awesome to see because we know that's what he can do. Musa played great. There's so many great things about what we saw when they had the ball. They just had a different flow and attack, and again, they could have had at least 2 other goals. You're right. The keeper just was on his head. He made some amazing saves. Some of the moves Balcon had in the box there. He just gets one pullback on away from him, and then he's got a second goal. It was a different kind of game, and I like to see that adjustment. The players needed to adjust to that, and they did. And then it was nice to see other players perform at a high level. You don't always want to have to rely on Pulisic to do that. He played, a very hard match against Mexico. He wasn't great against Canada, but he still was able to, play at a high level and help that along the way.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Canada also, was able to control Pulisic. But the problem was that we had other players who, okay, great, you're worrying about Christian Pulisic, but you had Balogun that you weren't accounting for. You had Reyna who was chopping you up everywhere. You still had Weah on the right side who was beating you. So I think that's the big difference for me, and why, again, I go back to the fact that Canada's they have very good players. They're not as good of a team because we were able to take Davies out of the game. And Caleb, they didn't really have anyone else who could step up to the occasion in a final. Whereas, Christian didn't have his best game. He still had a very good game. We had other guys who were able to say, I'm a show out here.
Yeah, I think that speaks to depth, right? They have some quality. Canada does. They have quality. Jonathan David, Kyle Aaron's a good player. Alphonso Davies is probably the best player in Concacaf. Tajon Buchanan, they've got talent, but it's a bit more sparse. It's like what we used to be. Like you said earlier, every spot we have is a capable player. And I think Scally, to Thomas's point, they're different guys for different roles, and Scally might have been the right decision regardless of whether Des was on a red, because he probably is going to do a better job on Alphonso Davies. Now, you never know. Dest, sometimes he just has games where you're like, holy crap, who is this? As far as his defensive work rate, and it could have done that, but I think Scally stepped up because he had to. Aronson being brought in was scrappy, like Thomas said, helping defensively. You didn't see him a ton in build up, but I think that's not what he was in there to do. He was in there to be annoying, to be a pest, and he was. But we had guys step up. We have the depth, and we are. It's like you look at MLS. What's the big knock? You have a very heavy roster due to DPs, and then it kind of tapers off. Whereas right now, the U.S. men's national team is kind of loaded-ish everywhere. There's not a lot of weak spots, and I think that showed. And then obviously, Reyna just, man, my goodness, just stepped up. You hate that he got hurt. Hopefully, it's not too serious. He looked pretty.
Yeah.
He looked pretty. It was moving pretty gingerly during celebrations. We'll say that. But hopefully, it was just kind of precautionary, and he didn't want to do any extra damage. But it was cool to see. I mean, Balogun kind of got used to things in the Mexico game. Richards and Balogun, they scored their first goal for the U.S. in a final. Big game players, and you saw being dangerous on set pieces. Gio taking set pieces, I think, was a fantastic move. I don't know. There was just so much to like, and this is the thing is we're not even at the top. We're not our guys are literally. We're still talking about babies. Their prime. Our prime is 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Thomas, I think that's a good point where we're still ascending, I think, is my takeaway from this. Is we have made a big step forward, but it does feel like this team is still climbing.
Well, it's surprising because after the World Cup, I was a little obviously they're younger, but you question it a little bit, right? Did they, is this it, right? Is this the ceiling? And so even during the club season, you still question a little bit, but you see that what they're building here. And look, the Balogun, part of it is huge, right? Because it's clear he's not in sync with these guys yet. And so that's kind of a key, takeaway here. He still was able, Mexico, they were pulling the guy down. I mean, they took him out of the game. It's not like a lack of his quality. It's just, they just took him out of the game.
Yeah.
And so kudos to them. I mean, and so for doing that, but he he got back in the starting lineup against Canada, and he had his opportunities, and he had some awesome ones, and he finished one, but you can still see that there's just 10 days is not enough to really do that, and maybe you have a friendly, maybe you see a little bit more from him in terms of that gameplay, that game speed, to be able to build that continuity in there. So it's building. There are three. The peak is the World Cup in 2026, but there's two large tournaments where you're going to see the A squad, and they need to show, they need to grow, in those tournaments, because that's the thing. They've got to. I said earlier in a tweet, they have to max out the matches in both of those tournaments. They have to get the max amount, because they've got to get that opportunity. They've got to get that experience. They don't need to win them, but they've got to play the max amount of matches at that high level against that high quality, the elite, and that's going to be the difference, right? Because they have to see that to be able to know, how they're going to be able to attack that, how they're going to be able to beat that. Because you can game plan all you want, but until you actually get into the speed of the game and the quality of the game, sometimes you don't realize that, in the international level. You see it maybe at the club level, but not there.
Yeah, and I think specific to the Canada game, these guys, I was worried after the Mexico, to your point, like we want to get as much as we can out of these tournaments. I was worried after the Mexico game that we may have spent all of our emotional and psychological energy on Mexico, which is totally understandable. Like, you want to beat Mexico. You were so fired up, you beat them 3-0. But the way they were able to then come back against Canada, still like the same level of focus and intensity, to me, that goes to your point of you need to play. You have to get used to that, because in a tournament, in the World Cup, in Copa America, yes, your group games are going to be tough. But after you get out of that and it survive and advance, every match is intense, and you have to be up your intensity and focus for every single match. And I thought they did that against Canada, who is a better team than Mexico, and beat them 2-0, a very similar scoreline. And to be fair, a match that kind of mirrored each other, where we dominated the first half, and in the second half we were able to just kind of absorb pressure while still trying to find chances to score. So I agree with you. Like, that's kind of the good part that I take away from this. Most importantly, is that we were still able to keep that intensity from match to match. Again, it was only 2 matches. It was only the 2 in the window, but that's good. This team specifically gets a break, right? Which is probably a little bit needed, right? They went through the November World Cup through December, and qualifying itself was a slog. They kind of had a break, but you come back in March because you got to play the Nations League matches there. Then you go to these matches here. You get the summer off, so hopefully they can take time to rest and recover and recuperate, because now we're looking at, okay, we are claiming the title of best in the region. Specifically with our A team, like, I don't think that's debatable. What's that next step? So Caleb, as we look at how we beat Canada, how we were able to play slightly differently than we did against Mexico and still beat them, what do you think that next step is for this team?
Well, first of all, talking about the mentality of going from Mexico to Canada, I think there was a clip in the Behind the Crest where BJ is talking to the team and he says, guys, enjoy this. We just beat Mexico 3-0. This is awesome. And Pulisic, steps up and says, guys, be humble about it, though. Guys, enjoy it for now.
Yes.
It is what it is. It's awesome. And he said, but we got to get back to work. We got to be focused, because the main goal is to win a championship. And I think, that's where the experience that our guys are having, pushing themselves to the highest level, specifically Pulisic, who has won a Champions League. Like, he scored against Real Madrid to help send Chelsea to the Champions League. This is the biggest club tournament in the world. That type of mindset is what is helping our team thrive. Can you imagine, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, beating Mexico was the championship. It didn't
Yeah,
matter what was next.
absolutely.
Like, and now it's that Kobe Bryant, job's not finished. Job's finished. No, we're up 3-0. We're three games to nil. Like, we still have one more to go, and that's that killer mentality.
Yeah.
That's the progression that we're making. And I think that's the next step that you're talking about, is more of our guys continuing on the club level, playing in these big matches, big games, playing for clubs that are top table, that have chances to go to the Champions League, that are playing Europa League, that are playing for titles in their domestic leagues. That's where the development continues. That mindset, that mentality, the guys that have the hunger, that are not just happy enough with beating Mexico. Again, like that's what we lived for. If we beat Mexico, God, we could live on that. It was like when UGA had bad, some bad seasons. If we beat Florida, we were good. Like, that was our mentality as Dogs fans. Not anymore. We've reached a new level. Now, I mean, that's an expectation. That is the next step.
Look, it feels good to beat your biggest rival in a tournament. I think it's safe to say that Canada has become our second rival right now. I mean, we've kind of gone throughout our history of having different rivals throughout time. I mean, Costa Rica has been a big rival because they've been good. It does feel like Canada, and credit to them, it feels like they have a fully grasped that top 3 spot in Concacaf, which good for them. They should. They're the third largest country in the region, like they should be. But it does feel like Canada's definitely our second rival right now. I'm not going to say 1-2, but we have a second rival now that makes games more fun.
Yeah, there was some heat. There was a couple of heated moments. Not as crazy as the Mexico match, but there was some heated moments, and towards the moments in there where they're like, I don't understand what happened. Tejan pushed Aronson.
Look, you live close to them. Canadians are just rude people.
No, they're very nice people, but I tell you, these fans, I get it. They were us, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so they've got a taste of it. They're gonna, Herman said it, recently. I think it was just today. Their statement was released. They think they have a chance to win this World Cup, or make a run in that. But the reality is that, they don't have certain resources available to them, that been afforded to them, because they just haven't been good. And so, but they have quality. They have players playing at high levels. So those are good matches to see and excite the fan base, because it is nice to have different, rivals other than Mexico in there. Some of the Costa Rica battles have been good, along the way. And so it's good to see, because it makes a stronger confederation, right?
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what needs to happen. If we're gonna compete, on the level of, the African Confederation and the Asian Confederation, overall, there needs to be better quality. You need to have 4 or 5 really good teams, cycle after cycle, providing that and pushing one another to be better. Because if you don't, because U.S. is going to struggle and Mexico is going to struggle to kind of go to that next level, because we have to find ways to play better quality. And so some of it has to happen within your confederation, and then something has outside of it. So,
well, and to go back to a former point that we made, is that's kind of why I also like the Nations League matches. They're not friendlies. There is actually something on the line. So yes, I get it. We're playing Grenada, but like, the boys know that they have to perform well, and that's not always the case in a friendly. So again, I think that's why I like this Nations League format, is because it does focus our attention on the matches. It's not just to come in and have some fun for a couple weeks and then go back to your club situation. Look, I just want to talk about a couple of moments from the match, but the first one that came out, Walker Zimmerman with his volley from the top of the box, if that had gone in, I think at that point in time, I would have just like I would have claimed like kings of CONCACAF for eternity.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. Like it snapped back so fast. I doubled. I didn't think he was the one that shot it.
Right. I was like, who did that come from? Oh my God, it was Walker. Caleb, that was like a legit shot.
Listen, I would prefer you call him by his correct given name, which is Walker Zinedine Zidane Zimmerman. That would have been unreal. And honestly, I had gotten up to get something. I see it out of the corner of my eye, and I was, oh my God. And then I saw it was like panning as Walker's running back.
Yeah.
I was like, that was Zimmerman? Holy
I mean, he's had
smokes.
headers from that distance that were on target, but not a volley like that. I mean, good
That
Lord.
was that not his weak foot too? Was that not lefty?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, golly.
Listen, of all the people that I genuinely dislike, I genuinely dislike the, oh, well, he plays in MLS, so he's not very good. I think Walker is the one that I'm like, I mean, Caleb, you and I have had our thing about Miles Robinson, but I don't think Miles gets that same stink. Walker has been very good for us, and people want to harp on the one mistake he made in the World Cup, and it was a mistake. A lot of center backs have made that mistake in their time. Walker Zimmerman has been a very good defender for the U.S. national team, and clearly is a very good leader also. I mean, again, I don't think he's our best center back. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he is clearly a very good leader, and the worst case scenario is he's your fourth or fifth best center back. That's really good. And especially right now, when you look at, again, the growth that this team hopefully will get, having an older brother type figure out there is probably going to be good. Anyway, I couldn't not talk about this Canada game without that. But we also get Balogun's first goal. And this has been, it feels like a long time coming, even though this is his second game for the national team. He wasn't, I think you said, Thomas, it wasn't necessarily like he was super effective or in that first game, but he was still doing a lot of good things. He finally gets his goal. It was a very good finish. It was a great pass from Gio. This feels also like the start of something big.
Yeah, it's a different feel up there. You know, when you have there's, I don't know. I mean, he's very young, but he's so composed and mature in his everything, his movements, everything he does he's doing it at a very high level, and so it's exciting to see that because I'm not sure we've had a striker like that. I mean, you maybe have moments when Josie could do something,
Yes.
moments I'm saying, but
Yes.
but and so some of that stuff he can hold up play like that's what you need in general, and so it's all coming together a little bit with that, and so that's going to be critical to the success because you need that composure in those moments, right? You've got to be able to finish. We too often miss opportunities, hits the post, whatever. I can Balogun, he's got to finish those instead of just missing those, right? When we talk about the striker position, their job's to score, and that's to me is exciting to see. And he's being pushed too. Pepe is not going to back down, and I mean I'm stoked to see this kid fight his way back in there because he's right there.
Well, look, I mean, Caleb, he got a goal too. So like, I think that's where I'm at. And this is kind of how I want to wrap up this discussion, right? Because 5-0 aggregate scoreline. We didn't give up a goal. We barely gave up a lot of shots, to be quite honest. I mean, we didn't give up a whole lot of chances. But yes, I think it's okay to say Balogun's the starter. But Pepe is right behind him. He got a goal too. That applies to everyone. Everyone is having this conversation now about like, oh, well, how do you leave Gio Reyna out of a starting 11? It's like, well, when Tyler Adams comes back, you have 4 guys who can start. Stop making this a drama and be excited for the fact that we have 4 guys who can kind of interchange. We, like I just said, we have 4 center backs who I think I'd be comfortable with all of them starting at any. Those are positives. right? Stop being dramatic about this. Be like, oh, well, you think Gio shouldn't start. Yeah, maybe if depending on the opponent, I think it should be McKinney and Musa. Maybe depending on the opponent, I think Tyler should sit. So, Musa's the deep guy and we're going to be more like this gives us so many more options to play soccer in a proactive way. That's the kind of the thing that we've been wanting to do for a while. It's not why are we arguing about this when the reality is we've just increased the amount of guys who we trust by 2-3 more.
Look, I mean, we as a fan base, U.S. men's national team fans, aren't used to this, having to choose between quality players.
Yeah.
Used to, it was like you were scraping to get 11 quality players, and then if one of those went out, oh crap, this guy.
Which not very good left back are we starting today?
Yeah, I mean, talking about Walker Zimmerman being the fourth or fifth guy. There was a time where it was like, okay, we have John Brooks and who, and now, I mean, center back is a flourishing position for us. This is the new norm, right? You think France, you look at their squad, their depth, it is insanity.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: we live in a world where everybody looks at the starting 11, the first 11. Oh, it's got to be, and they're playing FIFA, and the guys never get injured in FIFA. And who do you have? Listen, the reality is what we just witnessed this past week, right? Adam's out, Wes red card, Des red card. Like, you are not always going to have the most utopian, perfect first choice 11. Every now and then it'll work out that way. But that's just not reality.
Yeah.
Form, fitness, injuries, like opposition. If you're playing a team that's going to sit low, absorb pressure, then yeah, maybe you want McKinney, Musa, and Gio because they're probably going to be the most creative bunch. They're going to be able to make things happen. But if you're playing a team that is way more on the attacking side of things, they're going to control things a bit more, then maybe you do want Adams, who is a bit more defensive. I mean, he is a defensive dog. Why would you not want that on the field? All this stuff changes what you might want, what you might have available. It's just, we don't live in a perfect world. We don't live in a utopian world where everything is, a video game. So I think the conversations are a bit.
They're bad faith arguments. This is what I come back. Like, we're arguing about how good our team is the way I look at it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
We're getting mad that our team that we have more good players than we can put on the field.
How dare you want Tyler Adams over Yunus Musa? Like, whoa. Hey, they're both phenomenal players. Like, it's okay. You can have your preference. I can have my preference. There's three of us on this podcast right now, and we might all have, three different 11s. There's just a possibility of that, and it is what it is. It is nothing but a good thing, and there's no other way to spin that.
Yeah, and so for me, Thomas, I tweeted it out earlier this morning, and that's just one of my big takeaways. It's like, we don't need to, the fact that we have options to create a best 11, right? Because a best 11 also means how are you getting the best performance? I do not recall a time in the U.S. men's national team history where we were truly looking at how do we get the best 11 players to create the best game plan and performance, right? It's always been about we got to get our best 11 out there because, Jeff Agus is in our best 11 because who else is going to do that job type of stuff. Where now it's like we actually have options, we have choices, and if person 1A isn't available, we have a 1B in a lot of positions.
And that's the thing. You have to. So I think we've evolved to the point where we don't have to do that, right? We can say, geez, this is the opponent. This is their strength. This is their weakness. Let's attack that by putting this formation, this piece in there, instead of saying, and that's where the intelligence, of how you manage the team is going to come to play. You can't just say, as Caleb said, it's FIFA. Just put your best, best rating players out there and, run at it. It doesn't work that way. You have to be strategic. You have to do that. And when the U.S. did that at the World Cup in the 3 group stage matches, they did very well because they planned it. They knew who their opponent was, and they went out there and they structured those matches specifically to that. And that was, to me, was very brilliant. Unfortunately, they didn't maybe scout out Netherlands because they clearly didn't have a similar type of game plan in place. In that match, but that's the key. Like, you've got to take that intelligence to that next level. And I think if you can do that, I think, good things are going to happen because we don't have world-class players, but we have a collective group of really talented players that can lift one another up and perform and provide those results.
Last thoughts before we get out of here, gentlemen. Thomas, I'll let you go first.
It was a good tournament. I think I don't want to, I want to say 2 things on negatives. The passing completion was abysmal versus Canada. I mean, it was the worst we've seen.
Yeah.
I think that was probably my takeaway from that match. And the other thing I really, and this is a maturity and composure thing, is that while Mexico was causing the drama and entice, creating, the heat in that match, the U.S. players have to compose themselves. We can't be getting direct red cards for things in general, right? And they're both wrong. They shouldn't have happened. But and again, I think Caleb was pretty big into saying, look at these Mexico players, put their hands on the other players' necks, in previous matches and not get any sort of card. But we have to be better than that. We've got to be composed in those moments. In big tournaments, you can't afford to lose that talent.
Yeah.
Right? That's significant.
Yeah.
You don't have, you might have the depth, but you still have to want to have the best opportunity to put those players forward. So I'm hoping we'll see, that evolve here during the cycle, is that composure, in those heated moments, because, just another area of growth. But it was great. I was excited to see that. I'm excited to see, Matt Turner in the Gold Cup. I think he, had a couple big saves.
Yeah.
But yeah, his footwork's a little shaky. Yeah. But I think that's partly because they're playing different. And so I think, they're playing a little bit different style than we saw before. So I think there were more pressure on him. So he had to kind of kick the ball a lot more 50-50s, a lot more punts, a lot more, booting down the field. And just because they're playing differently. And so I think we as fans have to get I'll be okay with that, because it's going to provide,
especially with a legitimate striker up top who can both hold the ball, but also, that is a big deal. You can send it long. Right. Caleb, any last thoughts on this Concacaf Nations League championship? Our second, we're 2 for 2.
No, I think, you got to look at it and be pleased with what we saw, right? I think the players are bubbling with confidence. You see the attacking freedom. You see a 3-0 win versus Mexico, a 2-0 win versus Canada. We win a Concacaf Nations League final, right? All this is very good. We cannot see a regression. Now, obviously, Gold Cups, whatever. It's a completely different roster. But with our top roster, our top selected players, in the future, when people take over the team, we cannot see a regression.
Yeah.
And if we do, there needs to be a quick trigger or something to be done. We'll talk about this later, I'm sure. But I'm hoping there was a very specific person who was paying attention to how fun and exciting and effective that our boys can be under the right circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, look, fun would be the best way to describe these past 2 games, in my opinion. It was fun. I had a fun time watching them. Obviously, watching at a bar with friends makes it a heck of a lot of fun. But yeah, I agree. I had a lot of fun. It was great to watch them. Hopefully these guys continue. And I'll be honest, I think this puts pressure on the Gold Cup squad to match that, which is good. I mean, again, these Gold Cup players are battling sometimes they might be battling for that backup spot. I mean, I think it's a legitimate case to say that I think Musa is the second behind Adams, but like, I still want to know that we have a legitimate backup number 6, right? I think that's kind of where I'm at. Musa's great. Can we get an actual backup number 6 just in case Adams actually is available? Or, do we have an actual backup left back? These are questions that we still have to answer. So the Gold Cup squad, they have pressure on them as well. And you don't want to be the ones who lose this streak of, we're now at 3 tournaments in a row with the trophy in CONCACAF. Don't lose it. My last thought is more broadly, I think this was an interesting showcase for CONCACAF. And I'm slightly ending this on a negative because I think that the USA-Mexico game was not a very good display of what CONCACAF is. I think that the refereeing enabled the drama and chaos to happen. I think that if you're CONCACAF, it's hard to, you want to celebrate the intensity that this region does have and the passion that we have here. But that wasn't a great display of passion and intensity. Those weren't good. I also think that, looking at the attendance numbers, it wasn't good. It was not a well-attended final. The problem is when you package these two together, right? If one team fans buy all the tickets and then they don't show up, well, of course, the 65,000 seat stadium is going to look empty because all the Mexico fans bought the tickets and then they decided not to show up. I think that CONCACAF needs to look at that and figure out maybe a alternative way to do that. I know that they do this for ticket sales and they're trying to maximize. I get it, but I think that the USA-Canada game would have sold more tickets had it not been coupled with possibly Mexico being there. If you had been able to buy a ticket after US, or Canada clinched a spot, I think maybe you would have seen a better attended crowd. You could also see exactly where the expensive tickets were, where they were not, because the middle parts were empty. But at the same time, I truly believe that Nations League is now the premier trophy in this region because you're getting the 4 best teams in the finals. And I think in this inauguration or this edition of it, I think Panama proved over again, you had 6 games or whatever, that they were good. I think that is way more beneficial than the Gold Cup where you have 2 to 3 opponents before things actually start kicking off. We're learning what the Nations League actually means for us. I think it's okay to not understand. Celebrate, though, because we won, and that's the most important thing. Thomas, where can we follow you and get more of your work?
You can follow me on Twitter at USKeeper, and I also post a couple stories on Chasing Cup, so I'll hopefully have one here shortly about venues, but I got to get my button gear and wrap that up. So
I've been waiting for this to come out, to be quite honest. I'm excited to see all of your research and everything on it. Caleb, where can we follow you?
Corner, baby. USMNT Corner. Come on down.
And obviously you can follow the show at Soccer for Us Pod and support the show at buymeacoffee.com/soccerforuspod. Remember, I'm going to Australia and New Zealand. So, if you want to buy me a coffee to help me get through the travel, that'd be awesome. Thank you both guys for joining me on this episode to celebrate a second Nations League title. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back soonish to talk about some other pressing issues within U.S. soccer. But for now, let's look forward to the Gold Cup, try to go win another trophy. So again, thanks for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.